What is the one thing that every successful marriage has? Sacrifice. Mutual sacrifice is what holds a marriage together. This is likened to the relationship between Christ and the church. Both parties must be willing to sacrifice for each other. Christ sacrificed his life so that the church may have life, so that the church may be pure, and so that he could return the church unto God without blemish and without fault. And so must the husband sacrifice his own needs, his own self, so that his wife may be loved, she may be cherished, so that he can return her back to God without blemish, without flaws, without fault. The church sacrifices for Christ in dying to itself every day. Every day that we wake up, we must die to our flesh. We must die to our own selfish desires. We must die to our wants, our needs, and try our best to live according to God's will for us because he knows best. Similarly, so should the wives wake up every single day and be willing to sacrifice herself for her husband, sacrifice her need to lead, sacrifice her need to be in control, sacrifice her need to want to be the head of the house, and instead take a posture of service, take a posture of selflessness, giving more than you want to receive. That's how we must sacrifice ourselves daily. So today we're going to talk about one of the main ingredients that is needed for a successful marriage, and that is sacrifice, self-sacrifice. And this is a mutual sacrifice that is needed from both spouses. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is how are we going to replicate this sacrificial relationship between Christ and the church? Every time marriage is discussed in the scriptures, we see that it's compared to the relationship between Christ and the church. And we're seeing where the husband is told that he should model the love, the sacrificial love that Christ had for the church and still has for the church. His willingness to sacrifice his own life, to give up himself, even though he had the power and the authority to overcome all those who crucified him. He decided to go through extreme suffering, extreme discomfort, extreme torture, just so that we could have life and have it more abundantly, just so that we can have a chance at salvation. And it's the same thing that is required for the husband. As a husband, it's your duty to protect your wife, to cover her, to sacrifice your own needs, your own desires to make sure that she is okay. We see where in the scriptures the husband is told that he must love his wife more than he loves himself, or just as he loves himself. He should return her just like Christ did with the church, unblemished, untainted, clean and pure and sanctified. So you should not be causing your wife emotional or physical harm either. You should be making sure that she is physically okay, she's mentally okay, she's financially okay. You have to be covering your wife. You have to be protecting her. Sometimes you have to protect her from her own self. You have to pray for her, building your relationship with God together and also separately. But you have to cover your wife. And wives, you have to sacrifice just like the church is ordered to sacrifice for the relationship with Christ. We know that we must die daily. We have to kill our flesh daily, our earthly desires, our fleshly desires, our natural desire to sin. And it's the same thing. We are expected to die daily. Every day you wake up, kill your desire to be mean, kill your desire to be disrespectful, kill your desire to dislike your husband, kill your desire to talk down to him, kill your desire to manipulate him using your body, kill the desire to be selfish. We have to go into it, with this posture of service to one another, just like we vow to serve each other in the kingdom. It's the same thing in our marriages. So what's the benefit of sacrifice? How does it work? Why do we need to sacrifice? So your willingness to sacrifice demonstrates your faith in God, because when you're able to look beyond what your eyes can see, so your eyes can see that your husband's imperfect. You can see all the things he's doing wrong. You can see all his flaws. You can focus on all the things that he does that gets on your nerves, right? But when you decide to have faith in God and trust God and to trust his words and to trust that his promises towards you will not go back to him void. When you can do that, you can look beyond what you're seeing in the physical. You can look beyond what your eyes are seeing. You can look beyond what your flesh is telling you. And you can treat your husband not according to what he's doing, but according to the promises that God made to you. So instead of focusing on his flaws, you can see him the way God sees him. You can focus on his potential, focus on the man that he can be. And what I want you to recognize is that the Bible tells us that if we live according to us as wives, if we are able to live a holy and sanctified life that demonstrates the love of God, that demonstrates the church, and demonstrates the relationship between Christ and the church and what is expected of us as Christian wives, if you can do that, the Bible promises that you can actually save your husband. You can bring him to Christ. You can bring him to that point where he needs to be in God, that point where he needs to level up his relationship with God, his walk with God, his faith. You can do that not by uttering a word, not by preaching to him, not by reading the Bible to him and pointing out what he needs to be doing, but just by living holy. By living holy, you're sacrificing yourself. It's one way that as Christians we can get up and we can daily display our faith in God. We can display our walk with God. We can display where we are in our relationship with Christ. Because if you tell me that, I'm good with God, we have a good relationship, I read my word, I'm a good Christian, but then you're disrespectful to your husband, you're condescending, you're talking down to him, making him feel like he's less than a person, then I'm sorry to say, sis, but you're not there yet. And this is not to beat you down or anything. I was at a place where I thought I was in a good place with God. I had a good relationship. I knew what I was doing. I was a good wife. I was the best wife. He was lucky to have me. He's blessed to have me. I'm his gift. And sometimes I would go as far as to ask God, like, why would he do this to me? Why would he give me a man like this? And you know what? When God responded to me, he just basically asked me if I knew what the word said about being a wife. And once I went and I looked, and it was like, are you doing these things? Are you a respectful wife? Are you a supportive wife? Are you letting him lead? Are you holding on to control? And so he can fulfill his purpose as a man. He has this mandate as well, right? He needs to love you unconditionally. He needs to love you sacrificially, which means he is dying to his own desires. He's sacrificing his own desires, his own needs, his own wants, so that he can protect you, so that he can cover you, so that he can provide for you, right? But how easy do you think it's going to be for a man to love you that way? This kind of Christ-like sacrificial love, if you're being disrespectful and condescending. It has to go both ways. You have to do what the Bible says you're to do in order for him to feel good about doing what the Bible tells him to do. In an ideal world, a man that is just naturally loving you, sacrificially treating you a certain way, is gonna command that kind of respect from you. You won't have to ask for it. It would be natural or easy for you to submit to a man like that. But what if the disrespect came before or in the midst of him trying? Because let's face it, we don't come in knowing how to be the perfect wife. A lot of us, this is our first go around. We don't have good examples. But it's the same thing for him. He didn't have a good example either. He's coming from a single family home. He doesn't know what he needs to be doing. He's trying to be faithful and trying to do the right thing. But you're disrespecting him. You're tearing him down. You're calling out all his flaws in a not so good way. Do you think that's going to be helpful in encouraging him to love you in the way that he's called to love you? It has to go both ways, guys. It has to go both ways. And before you say, I'm not going to love him, I'm not going to respect him if he's not loving me and he's not respecting me. But how can you be so quick and ready to call out his flaws when you're not doing what you're supposed to do? The best thing to do is to make sure that you're right, because at the end of the day, you're still a child of God and you're still gonna have to account for your behavior. When your time comes and you come up and he's like, why did you say this, and this? Why did you treat him that way? You can't say because he said this and because he said that and blah, blah, blah. We have to hold ourselves accountable. We have to make sure that we are right. He may not be doing the right thing, but make sure that you are doing the right thing. Two wrongs don't make a right. If he's not doing the right thing, stay in your lane. Stay on your path. Your goal is still to make it to see God. Your goal is still to make it in heaven. So make sure above all else you're serving God and you're faithful to God and you're being true to God. Would you talk to a stranger the way you talk to your husband? If that answer is no, then I'm sorry, sis. We're Christians. We're expected to be respectful and to treat each other right and to treat each other godly. So if we're not doing that with the most precious gift that God gave us, which is each other, I don't know. I feel like your first ministry is your marriage, is your home. And if you're not getting it right there, it means you're not getting it right elsewhere. We're going to go outside and pretend like we're holy and pretend like we're good. And then we go home and we mistreat, we emotionally abuse each other. I know he may not be the best husband, but make sure you're being the best wife. Because at the end of the day, you can say, you know what? It didn't work out, but I tried my best. I did absolutely everything that the Bible told me to do. And majority of the time, if you're truly with a man that wants to be a godly man that wants to serve God, your marriage is gonna work out anyways. So just trust me, it works. Begin to sacrifice yourself. Let's talk about what happens when we decide to be sacrificial in the way we treat others. When we decide to serve other people other than serving our own selfish desires and needs. Well, let's talk about when God told Abraham to sacrifice Isaac. He asked no question. Abraham was willing to sacrifice his most precious gift. When God asked him, he had no reservations. He trusted God. I think it's Hebrews 11 where it talks about Abraham just knowing that even if he were to sacrifice his son, he had faith enough that God could raise him from the dead. That's how strong his faith was. He bound Isaac, tied him up, put him on the altar, ready to go, right? And then God had to stop him. No, no, no. I see your faith. You've demonstrated to me that you trust me and you were willing to sacrifice your most precious gift for me. And so Abraham turned around and there was a ram caught in the bush, ready to be sacrificed. God not just stopped him, but he made provision for him once he demonstrated his faith. He made provision. He provided a ram in the bush. What's your ram in the bush? What is the thing that's on the other side of your willingness to sacrifice? Sometimes we're unwilling to sacrifice our own desires and our own needs and our own wants. In the long run, we hurt ourselves. We hurt other people. Sometimes you gain the thing that you want so much, and then there's no fulfillment. There's no joy because you have no relationship. And then, God's not pleased with you. But when you're willing to give up of yourself, to do something for someone else instead of for yourself, God always rewards you better than you can ever expect. He rewards you in a way that you never even imagined. So instead of holding on to your Isaac and refusing to let it go, right? Because in the end, Abraham still had his Isaac. He still got to keep his most precious gift. And then God still blessed him with a ram in the bush. And your ram in the bush is just indicative of something extra, something more on top of the thing that he just wants to see a demonstration of your faith. But he's always gonna bless you more than you think, more than your mind can ever imagine. But you have to be willing to trust him. You have to be at that place where I trust God more than this need, this thing that I have that I want to hold on to so much. My need for control, my need to lead, my need to not feel like I'm beneath someone. Remember, you're not the only one instructed to sacrifice. Your husband's instructed to sacrifice for you. He is commanded to give up more for you. But there's something that you're holding on to that he needs so badly. He needs your respect. He cannot thrive. He cannot feel fulfilled without it. You may say, oh, I love him so much and he knows how much I love him. But are you demonstrating that through a way that makes him feel respected? You have to make sure he feels respected. It's the thing that drives men. And for you husbands, you have to make sure your wife feels loved. It's not just about providing financially, like, oh, I pay the bills and she has a roof over her head and she's good. No, she can do that herself. She can provide those things for herself. What she needs is that love that she can't get anywhere else, that support that she can't get anywhere else, that she can't even give to herself. She wants to know that you trust her, you believe in her, you see her as your gift from God. You see her as God intended for you to see her. Remember when Adam was in the garden, right? God created Adam and he was alone. And it was a good thing. God knew he created a good thing. He was perfect in terms of he was in the image of God, but he recognized that he needed companionship. He needed a helper. Not a physical helper, but someone that will be there for him. Someone that will be there to support him, for him to confide in, someone to love him. We need that connection. And the man won't feel connected if he doesn't feel respected. And your wife won't feel connected if she doesn't feel loved. I hope you guys understand the message today. The best relationships have mutual sacrifice. You have to be willing to sacrifice your own needs, your own comfort, your own desires to make sure that wifey is good. And wifey, you need to sacrifice your need to lead, your need to be in charge, your need to be right, so that he can feel respected and he can feel loved. We both need love and respect, but it looks different for each of us. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more ways on how to improve your marriage using biblical principles.